My name is Ron Gill. I'm an extension livestock specialist with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension, and I've been teaching stockmanship schools and working with producers and designing working facilities based on good stockmanship skills for the past 20-25 years. So uh, the facility side of it is one that I don't spend a great deal of time on because we've got so many other things going, but there's not many other people actually working in this space. Dr. Grandin does up in Colorado, but some of her systems are way too uh, elaborate for most people's needs. And so I try to get down to talking about what we might need just from a basic standpoint, and maybe trying to figure out why some existing facilities don't work as well as they should. And so the biggest thing on designing facilities that work, and I think my title said, is also that you can afford, because we can design some really elaborate facilities that cost more than most cow calf operators could possibly afford. But we try to look at good cattle handling skills in addition to the facilities we're looking at. So understanding behavior allows us to put in facilities that work better for them. And the biggest factor there to me is it makes it easy to work the cattle, but it reduces safety risk to people and livestock. And that also reduces stress, reduces loss associated with handling of livestock. So trying to help preserve animal and personal well-being as you go through that process. So a lot of people get hurt in the process of handling cattle, and part of that and a lot of it is how we use facilities, and so that cannot be uncoupled, and nobody on a farm or a livestock operation can actually afford to be out of commission. So we really want to keep that in mind. But as we look at some of the general things on designing corrals, you'd like to have good drainage from it. A lot of y'all may actually be working under cover in barns, establishing your working facilities that way. But if not, thinking about some of the things that are on the screen right now, in the road issue in our part of the world is a big deal, because if you don't build it in the right location, you can't get trucks or trailers in anytime you need them. And so that can lead to some stress on livestock as well. So just some simple things there. The space for expansion that may be difficult in enclosed environments, but if that's the case, then building it right the first time and being able to add on to it later outside that initial area is something that we might want to focus on. The other part is the ease of getting cattle to the working facilities and into the working facilities. From the holding traps and the holding pens into the processing area is a big deal. In our part of the world, shade is a big issue. In your part of the world, probably more, well, shade would be too, but protection from cold as well would be a big issue to think about there. All right. So nearly everybody has the same basic needs. I don't care how big the operation is. And how it's set up depends on a lot of the existing facilities you're trying to put it in, or whether you have a clean slate, and then how much power and capacity do you need in there. And I was putting this together the very first time. I found these pictures of these vehicles, and I thought they kind of were fitting when talking about power. Some people want all the bells and whistles in one place, and sometimes it may actually be just a little bit too much, and so we don't need all that additional equipment sometimes that we might invest in. So trying to figure out what you might need that kind of goes under that, still have enough power to get things done, but not overdo it. And then some of us may just want a small set of facilities that actually is very functional, works good, stout, and will get the job done. And there's going to be some of us in the cow business that just wants the very utility aspect of a set of facility, just the bare minimum. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as it's safe and effective in getting livestock work. So we'll kind of touch on all of those a little bit. But in my opinion, we need the best system that we can afford that has all the things in it that we need. And so what that is, you kind of have to determine as you go through this process, but understanding what kind of facility you really need to have. How much holding capacity do you need to have around the corrals? Everybody needs some. You need holding pens that then confine the cattle even more and bring them in closer to the sorting pens, the processing areas, or into the alleyways. And then one thing that a lot of people put in as an afterthought is a way to load cattle out. That needs to be in the very forefront of your thought process, is how you're going to get them loaded on a trailer so that you don't get cattle injured in that process, or people, because a lot of people are injured as we work through the loadout process, getting cattle out. And they can look a lot of different ways. I just put up some facilities that I've been involved with over my life, and this was the first set of corrals my family ever built, and it looks kind of interesting, but it didn't actually work very good. This was another one, more squared appearance. It's curved sweeps, that kind of thing. And these had very simple designs that were very effective. This is probably one of the best corral systems we ever put together. And this is one I currently work out, and it is a piecemeal situation. I inherited an old set of working pens on a lease, and then tried to adapt that to have something that actually works. And so that is some of the things we can think about and how we get plans put together. This is another one I made for the Beef Cattle Center there at Texas A&M. It's something that has good holding pens that funnels into the processing area and then comes back out into sorting pens in the return alley. So a lot of different things can be done, but being able to get cattle where they need to be without a whole lot of extra effort and sometimes a little additional money in the design and building of a working facility can make it so much easier and so much safer for everybody involved. Now, the other part you got to figure out is how many cattle will you be working at any one time. That dictates how much holding capacity you need, whether you're bringing livestock in through exterior alleyways or whatever it might be into holding facilities. Will you be holding them overnight will dictate whether you need water access, maybe even electricity. Is there water available, electricity available? What does shade or cover look like in that area? Do you have to build all that? So once again, kind of, if you don't have many cattle, this gets to be quite simpler. You can put it in a pretty unique position a lot of times. So depending on the size of your operation, you may need quite a bit of holding capacity, and we'll kind of talk about square footage in just a minute. But whatever you design, try to understand cattle behavior. And if you haven't gone to some stockmanship trainings, and there's a lot of people teaching stockmanship these days, but try to look at going to some educational programs on that, understand where people need to be, and a good design will actually help people be in the right spot. Now, what can you do to make it more functional and economical without making it cheap and flimsy? And then can changes be made in that overall design to reduce cost? But in the end, as I keep harping on, is this safety. And I always base everything off these 5 basics of cattle behavior. Putting people where cattle can see you. With that said, you can't be in the way. And so in the corral design, sometimes we may have to cover an area to protect view from other livestock or people that's in the wrong spot. This whole going around you comes into play, and that's why a lot of Dr. Temple Grandin's designs are in a curve. She really focused on the fact that cattle have that natural tendency to go around you, but in reality, it's because they want to keep an eye on you, and a curve system will allow to do that. Cattle work just as well in a straight system. Sometimes building a curve into it allows you to place a facility in an area and then redirect where you're coming from the crowding tub into a curved alleyway to redirect where your chute or head gate might be. So don't discount either curved or straights. Straights are just easier to install, but curved alleys certainly are very effective as well. Trying to get cattle to flow, and that's where this third item is. once you can get the front one started, the rest of them will normally go easier. What you got to do is try to figure out how to start the first one easy, and that's part of what the design will hopefully help do. Take advantage of this fourth one. Cattle want to remove pressure, and a lot of people interpret that as cattle want to go back where they came from. And well, as we look at designs, anytime cattle can go past where you need them to end up, they'll flow back better the other way. And we have to have time for those cattle to really think about what we're needing them to do, but not really spend a lot of extra time worrying about that. We've got to make sure they can understand what we want them to do, and then we put enough pressure on them to make them go do it. Keep talking about this. Facility design, put people in the right place. That way you're not out of place having to really be concerned about where the livestock are seeing people. If you're in the right spot because of the design, it helps in that. Cuts down on foot traffic during the day, takes advantage of the natural tendencies of cattle that we just talked about. Avoided distractions. Most distractions we worry about probably don't bother the cattle unless they're afraid. What distractions really I see most often are other cattle maybe in the wrong place or going opposite directions of where you want the flow to go. And cattle tend to go, like I said, as a herd. So if you got one group of cattle on one side going one way and you're trying to send cattle up an alley the other way, that's a very big distraction to and will stop the flow of cattle. So some of the designs we need to think about it, how we get cattle to always move forward and not come back by others we're trying to move forward. Try to make that make sense more in a minute. Cost is a big deal. Can we get it done inexpensively with existing or inexpensive materials? And most of the time we can if we don't overbuild some of this stuff. So once again, the number of cattle you'd run through it, like a stocker or a feeder operation, would need better and stouter equipment because you're going to use it more. But a cow-calf operation will need certainly strong enough equipment that a cow can't tear it up or a bull can't tear it up as you're processing those cattle. So minimizing costs, but still staying within that effective and safe range. Floor surfaces are a big deal. A lot of y'all may work on concrete. If you do, you need to have really good surfaces on that concrete so cattle don't slip. Footing and traction is one of the biggest distractions. Cattle do not like to slip and fall. They don't like to be unsure about their footing, just like we don't. In that picture there where Dr. Grandin is standing talking, in that chute alleyway goes into that barn. That dark transition right there may cause cattle to balk, for example. So lighting, going from dark to light, is not a problem, but going from light to dark, it may be. So to fix that, you might actually have to put a light right over that opening so the cattle don't mind going into the barn or into the enclosure. Little simple things like that can really improve flow. The biggest thing is, don't ever make that opening or that dark transition right at the exit from the crowding pen. And so if you have trying to go out of a crowding pen into a dark system, that doesn't work very well. And even with lighting, it's very difficult to get cattle to flow out of that. So you'd like to have them in single file as they enter that transition zone going into a barn if you have to have transition. Whether you have solid sides, open sides, that kind of depends on where you have people and distractions. And so that's something else you can think about. I personally like systems that are about half sheeted, not up as high as that one there in this picture on the slide. That to me gets cattle raising their head sometimes, and that will actually cause them to stop as well. So I want them to see me when I want them to see me and feel my pressure. So, but that's one of those areas up for debate between operations and operators. If you want it solid, make it solid. If you think it works better without that much metal on it or wood, it makes sense to do that as well. All sorts of different things can come into play. Whether you have other people standing and watching that aren't helping, that may be an issue. Whether you have unfamiliar odors, some people that have multi-species cattle may not like going by where the pigs have been, for example. Light beams that create shadows, but normally most things don't create a big issue unless cattle are afraid of it, of the situation already. But this whole deal of coming into 90-degree turns at the corner of pens, try to figure out how to make that work better. Normally, that's handled if you actually take less cattle at a time. You won't have as much balking in the front of a group of cattle if you've got smaller groups. So, a lot of the problems we have with facilities is because we're bringing too many cattle at any one time. So if you have changes in flooring height, for example, you're going down your crowd alley and then have to step up into a chute with a scale under it, that may actually slow your flow. So any kind of thing you can do to minimize the transition in slope, do that. So if you have to slope your crowd alley up to match your chute, try to do that so you don't have that transition drop off there or rise. Sudden noises, banging and clanging is not that big a deal. Some of the worst noise we can deal with is human voices. So trying to keep the noise down from a people standpoint seems to be the bigger issue. All right. There are a ton of different ways to build facilities. And understanding the limitations of those designs, I think, is important. And we can get by using some less desirable designs sometimes if we change how we actually work cattle. So trying to figure out what will work in your setup, where in your barn or whatever, however you need cattle to flow, may actually take some of these designs out of an option or may take some modifications of that design. So we'll kind of go through some of these pretty quick in a minute, but I always encourage everybody to really prioritize what they're going to be doing. If they're going to be sorting primarily, if you happen to be an order buyer, for example, your big job is probably going to be processing and sorting. So build your facilities to do most of that. You're also going to have loading and unloading if that's the case. If you're a cow-calf guy, most of what you're going to do is working and processing, some sorting, some loading, but it's not a continuous deal. So put your emphasis and your main money where you're actually going to be doing most activity. And so that's just something you have to think about. Most everybody needs all of that, but how detailed it might be or how fancy that might look sure varies from place to place. All right, this is actually a little pen we use to do demonstrations with as we go around the country doing stockmanship trainings. And this little design right now will work for 99% of the small cow-calf producers. It's very simple. It's got a small alleyway that leads into a bud box that leads into an alleyway into a chute. You can sort two ways coming out of the chute. The thing I like about this design, it's scalable. So if I wanted to add a pin onto the back of it, I just add pins onto the back of it. If I want to add one onto the side, I can do that. So this very simple design is expandable. So if you're willing to use a bud box, we'll talk about them more in a minute, this is a pretty good system. If your cows are too gentle or you're afraid to get in with them, don't build this kind of system. So that's, once again, knowing how to handle cattle and how to make that all work is important. Remember these dimensions. They're in every livestock handling website and anything else you talk about. This is kind of the agreed upon square footage dimensions. And these are for the holding pens as you get closer and closer to the processing area. If you're going to be holding overnight, you need at least twice the footage that they say in the holding areas. And so that is something that we would need to make sure we can get done. And once again, it's just a matter of having enough square footage in there that the cattle can get in there, move around, turn around, and not be overcrowded. Remember that the heart of the facility is going to be the processing area. And we want to make sure that we have a good alleyway going to the processing area. You have a good forcing pen or crowding area, whatever you want to call it. Crowd alley or lead up to the chute is really important, how that's designed and managed. And then a good, safe working chute. And it can vary everything from the top of the line hydraulic down to something that will catch an animal's head and hold it steady while you need to work on them. So don't get overly concerned sometimes about the details on what that's going to look like, but know how you want your processing area to be and then build away from that if at all possible. If you're building into existing facilities, that may not always be the best option, but it may not even be possible. So you may have to fit something in there. But if you can, try to build your processing area and then tie that into your existing pens if possible. The main thing I try to get people to talk about, if you can get cattle to go past where you need them to end up, they'll flow back better. And so that's something to think about. It's just a flow through part of the system in that crowding area. You don't want to store or warehouse cattle in a sweep, a tub, or any of that kind of stuff. And don't bring any more cattle there than will fit into the lead up. If you do, they'll have a tendency to turn around and want to go the other way, and they don't flow into the system very well. I'm just going to run through as quick as I can the different types of systems. And we have 90-degree sweeping crowding tubs. They're very simple. They fit a lot of operations, but they don't really have that flow back aspect to it. And they either require a little more force or the change in the way you're handling to get cattle to flow out of those 90-degree sweeps. And I put this picture in there just to warn everybody that this is a livestock equipment manufacturer's diagram, and he's showing a 180-degree sweep and calling it a 90-degree tub. So just make sure when you're trying to communicate with somebody, you all are on the same page. Excuse me. This is a little 90-degree sweep. Some people could get by with nothing more than something like this. It's a head gate on the end of the panels and some kind of crowding system to get the cattle into that little lead up. And if that's all you need, fine. In some places can get by with nothing more than a maternity pen with a head gate that's got a little sweep side to it. So don't think you have to have a big elaborate system if you don't have many cattle. Just build one that's safe and will stay together and allow you to get the jobs done you need. This is actually a corral design that's out of nearly every university corral design handbook there ever was published. And I've actually had a ranch that had this on it. But these little systems are not easy to work because you're always trying to drive cattle into a dead end area. And if that's the case, then it gets very difficult to get them up around that corner and into the lead up to the chute. And there's another thing about this. You'd always like the exit to the chute to be straight away for at least a body length or two of the cows you're working with. Another sweep that's kind of come on the market the last decade or two is this 135-degree sweep. To me, it's the second best sweep available relative to cattle behavior. And the drawback to it, it's not very big. So but there may be the benefit to it as well. If you're a small operator, I'd suggest you look to see if you can put this kind of system in because it actually takes natural tendency of cattle into play and it's much less equipment to get it done. And what we're talking about is a system like this. Cattle flow in through that alleyway and they come around the pivot post right there in the center of that green arrow. So anytime you get cattle to circle back, once again, remember that's how we get them to flow better out of a system. And this is just showing a system in place. It kind of looks a little bit odd. It's shaped a little different, trying to get cattle to flow into it. But that earlier design I talked about at the beef center, that's the system we put in there. But we changed the angle of our alleyways to make cattle flow into it quite a bit better. And it actually works very well. But it's cattle come to the far side of it. I've got a video here, shows those cattle coming in. And then as you start closing the sweep gate, you actually draw their head back to the opening, and then they can start down the side of that chute. And once again, they kind of jam up here, got to back up. But notice once again, as they move forward, now they've got an opening, they can move forward. and you can work on the side of the cattle, and that makes it all work a whole lot easier. So that's one thing we think about. Also, the open sides on this, the cattle can see you, so as you walk down their side, they move forward. That little system works really good for a lot of people. I'd encourage you to look at that if you're trying to build something new. The most common one we have, excuse me, will be the 180 sweeps. Those are either the 90-degree sweeps, and there's so many variations of these sweeps that it's hard to even look at all of them. But the most common ones will come around like this one, where it sweeps around and cattle kind of go out the far side of it. Very similar to what the 90 might do as well. But a lot of times the 90s will sweep back almost back towards you. So this is one design, once again, not straight enough off, coming off the tub into that crowd alley. Same system from different view. You bring cattle in, they have a tendency to want to circle. One of the biggest disadvantages of these systems is cattle want to circle in them. And so the thing to do is, once you get them in the sweep, stop pushing from the back, have somebody at the front walk down the side, draw their attention back to that opening, and get them to flow on out of there. Another combination with a loadout curve back into working system. So once again, you can change the angles of all these alleyways and stuff to fit what you need it to do, and redirect it to where you need it to come out, where you have a place to put your squeeze chute or head gate. This is another 180, comes around and goes right back out. And what really makes these work well is the guy standing down there by the hinged end of that post. He serves as kind of the pivot. Those cows can come around, see him. That stops their turning in circles. They can see the outlet to get out of that system. So once again, knowing where to position somebody is important, but try not to push too much from behind. They still have somebody on this gate, but I'd probably change that too if I could. You'll see these systems a lot in y'all's part of the world. These have these collapsible 180-degree sweeps with a little small gate that, as the big gate comes around, it kind of converges on the animal and shuts down to extend the alleyway. And that's designed to keep cattle from turning around in there. It doesn't really work well for that until you get down to just a few animals. And so that's the downside of these systems. If you're bringing very many through there, it takes a while to get to where that little collapsible gate's actually going to help. But it does extend that alleyway and actually give you a little bit extra room. There's also variations of 210. I'm not going to spin on that, just less angle going around there. Doesn't have quite the flow back to 270. A 270-degree sweep is what Dr. Grandin builds most of the time, where cattle come around that pivot post and flow back out to the chute or the loadout. And that's where you get really good flow, because once you bring those cattle into that sweep, they want to turn around and go back the other way, and then their opening to the chute allows them to do that. So this is really nice. If you can design this, it works really good. It doesn't have to curve back. It can actually go straight away back the direction it came from. And they work well either way. So think about these systems. You can have the alleyway coming into the sweep at different angles. This is one that's just a straight angle coming in. And notice they've got everything in here. The cattle would be in the lead up to the chute well before they get to the processing area. And I've got a video of this in a minute we'll look at. Nobody that's on this webinar probably needs this design, but this is the same kind of design we're talking about. It's a 270-degree sweep back around to the working chute. If you closed it off to go to the loadout for trucks, it's really about a 360-degree sweep. The cattle basically come right back around the post and come right back the same way they came in. So these are very elaborate systems, cost a lot, but work very effectively. This is that previous sweep we looked at, and I want to bring a couple of things to mind here. This is well designed, so the cattle already are flowing, but they'll still balk at that opening going in the chute. So Kurt walked toward the hinged end of the gate. He didn't stay on the latch end. And that keeps pressure on the cattle in the front, because the cattle in the front are the ones balking. And you've got to get that movement to go on around that post. Now, here he's not even going to use the gate. And if the cattle aren't real wild, this is my preference. He puts just enough pressure to keep the back ones pushing, but gives time and continues to focus on the front until he gets flow up in the front. And then the rest of them can get out. Once they start, notice he takes pressure off. So using these systems effectively is so important. And having people in the right place. It's no different than the 180 tubs or anything else. Everybody's back in the backside of this tub hollering at these cattle. And notice the cattle are looking where the people are. So if you want them to look toward the opening on this chute, you need to be up the front of it and not back in the back hollering at them. Any of you want to get really elaborate, there's some of these pneumatic working facilities with the gates that are automatic. You run them off of electric switches and hydraulics, and they'll move the cattle through the system for you. And there's quite a few of these going in. They can run a lot of cattle. It cuts down on fatigue. You still have to have somebody running it, but not necessarily in the processing tub in the area, getting them into the lead up. So it cuts out some of the distractions from people being in the wrong place. I'm not going to spend any time on that. Some of you can get by with what we call these V-shaped forcing pins. And most people will put cattle in those and kind of do what Kurt was doing, stay at the back and keep putting pressure on them till something decides they want to go out. But the problem is cattle will get up to the front of it and turn around to go the other way. And once they do that, it gets very difficult to get them up in there. I'm going to show you, if you work these, and I'm not sure why this is drawn. I need to redraw this, but have somebody more to the front of that V, just like we did in all the other systems we've talked about, and draw cattle out. So these are very simple systems to build and actually work really well. And this video I found on the internet, and this horse does what we need to do if we're working one of these V-shaped systems. These cattle don't want to get out of there, so this horse puts pressure on them away from where he wants them to go. And then when they do come around him, they've got movement forward. Now, the guy video wasn't doing his job, so as soon as he moves cattle up, these other ones will come in. So once again, people have to work together. Those cattle he started are still wanting to go. And if one doesn't go to the front, he'll push them away from that opening until they want to get out of there and take the pressure off. And so that's the same way we should work with them. So if a horse can figure it out on his own, surely a human can. The last one I'm going to talk about probably will be a bud box. A lot of bud boxes have been put in. A lot of people don't know how to use them very well, and they tend to get frustrated with them. And then they put gates in them to kind of use as a swing gate, and they get dangerous at that point. So a bud box simply takes advantage of those 5 things I talked about earlier. Cattle want to remove pressure. So when they get to the end of the bud box, they want to turn around. When they turn around, they're going to come around the person. They come around that person. They're going to follow one another. They can think their way out of that and then go down the chute or the alleyway to either the loadout or the working facilities. I'm going to show you this design because these young couple went to a training we did up in State College in Pennsylvania. They went home and found old materials and built them a working facility outside their old dairy barn, using high tensile wire for their holding pins and used materials for the chute. Put some gates up there beside the cattle if they needed to get in or let them out the side they could. Simple bolted a head gate onto some posts. This little system worked really good. This is a solid alleyway going down through there with a little gate on the back of it. Simple enough. Get cattle into their bud box, and this is real elaborate, isn't it? So this works. We went up there and did clinics at their farm, and it was really fun to work with this little couple in this bud box they built. They were very proud of it, and it worked very nicely. This is a system that was put in at an operation I was working with And I just wanted to show how easy cattle can work out of a bud box. Everybody say they don't always work this well, but they really do if you use them right. I asked the truck driver to get out of the truck. He's like most truck drivers, he didn't want to get completely away from it. But to his credit, when he sees the cattle are balking, he does get out of the way. And then you get flow, and these cattle flowing around you, following one another, taking pressure off, thinking their way out of this system. Now, I messed up by letting them jam up there a little bit. So I've got to restart these other ones, get them back around there to where they see the opening and have the draw of those others going on the truck. And then once at the very end, I have to take pressure off so that heifer can think her way out of that box. So it's very easy to do that. And if you're loading very many trucks or shipping cattle, boxes work really good. And that's the reason I keep bringing them up. They're just a really good tool. As we see, you can't see in the box on this one, but what I wanted to show was how they kind of load themselves. Once these front ones get started, the ones in the back are not going to let them stop or turn around. So you've got such flow and such pressure coming up on, applied by the cattle, not by people. They load themselves once you start them right. And so that's why boxes work so good and why we talk about them. But once again, you have to know how to use a box to get this kind of flow out of it. There are systems out there called Bud Flow. It was Air Equip didn't like having to get in with cattle, so this was kind of their answer to that. I will tell you, a good 270-degree sweep works exactly like what they're trying to do with this, so it works. Whether your crowd alley has curved or straight, we've talked about that already. V-shaped or straight-sided, I would prefer a straight-sided crowd alley that is adjustable in width. There's a lot of question right now about single or double entry alleyways. If you're working the box right or the tub right, a single entry alleyway is just as efficient and easy to work, and it costs a whole lot less than a double entry. And I'll show you a double entry if you're not familiar with that. Having some way to keep cattle from backing up once they get into the system is important. So no back sliding gates. These spring-loaded side stops is something else. But make sure these crowd alleys are safe and sturdy. I'll show you a picture in a minute. But open and solid side, I actually want them to see me so they can feel my pressure when I send them up. So I'm one that likes maybe the bottom rung or two on a fence to be solid and the top to be open. Same thing. We just saw this video. I'm not going to play it again. This is what I'm talking about as far as being safe. This is not safe. I'm not saying anything about the folks doing it. It's probably the best system they've had in a long time. But once again, if he's hot shotting cattle back there, when the father has a pipe blocking movement, that whole thing could swarm in a moment's notice. So build something that's very safe, very sturdy for this part of it, because this is one of the highest pressure locations you'll have on the farm. And this guy's processing with his head right up against these portable panels, and that's a bad idea, and certainly not according to BQA principles. This is a V-shaped. The idea there is that the smaller cattle can't turn around in the bottom of that V, and bigger cattle can still get through it. I would much rather have an open side, one that opens straight sided that opens up. And this one, most of these adjustables will go down to maybe 12 inches in width and open up to 36 inches. So that will allow bulls and calves to go through the same thing. A lot of the pre-manufactured things are on the market now that you can set into a situation and have a ready-built adjustable alleyway that's very efficient to use. This is one that's easily adjustable. It's got little pins that you just pull and move the sides in. So if you're buying a straight-sided or building straight-sided, it needs to be adjustable in width. And a lot of farms don't do that. And if that's the case, then you're going to be frustrated with calves turning around in the chute you built if you need to do that. So think about building one adjustable or having some way to narrow that crowd alley down. This just showing the latches on that one I just showed. but having them adjustable is important. I put this one in here so you can notice the no back right at the entrance point into the crowd alley coming out of the sweep. If those are there, you need to have that to where you can pick it up until cattle get started coming out of your sweep tub or your bud box. Once you get flow started, you can let it down, but have some rope or pulley system to pull that up. I prefer a sliding gate in that location, but can't always do that. So we'll talk just a minute more about no backs. And here's what we're talking about. Have it where it's adjusted to where it will hold cattle in, but not so low that it prevents them from wanting to go under it. And I see so many people will leave them too low and then have to hot shot cattle to get them to go past it. Redesign those. Have them where you can pick them up with a rope, something to not have to hot shot a cow just to get them to go under a no back. All sorts of design, homemade, all the way up to prefabs that you can buy to do this. And whatever you need to do makes it work. This one here has too much gap on the sides of it, and cattle will stick their head over it if it's too low, and it'll actually get their head caught sometimes. So be cautious in some of those. These side mounts, I don't mind them so much up in the alleyway. I do not want one of these at the back of the alleyway going into the tub of their box because cattle will balk at it. I have a system with the one on the right, and I take the springs off of it. That way it's not there. They don't have to push through it. But if one walks past it, I can push it in, and it actually works like a pipe would be. But it's not something that causes a problem. So thinking about these, they can be a hindrance to cattle flow, but you need something to keep cattle from backing up in the system. Just figuring out which one works for you. Sliding gates are my preference. If you can afford them, put them in there. They really work better than if you are using those no backs. But once again, somebody has to go open the gate. With a no back, cattle may actually follow one another through a system. This is a double entry alleyway, and the place that I see it for these is in a under roof in a barn somewhere where you need to have more capacity going through your crowd alley. The problem with these is that once the cattle get in there, they go back to single file before they get to the squeeze chute. That's a pinch point that requires somebody else to work. And so sometimes that can be a problem. Cattle can get to that pinch point and they won't even actually get out of your tub or your bud box and fill the alleyway. So once again, pros and cons. I like these because they're hydraulic. The no backs lift up out of the way and are easily adjustable with hydraulics. But once again, that's hydraulics. The cold environment, you better have that where you can keep it warm. Whether you're sorting, are you going to be sorting in corrals, alleyways, coming out of your chute? Do you need this a standalone part? I like sorting cows and calves between pens. It don't have to be horseback, that's for sure. I'd rather do it on foot a lot of times anyway, because you just got people and can do a little better finesse than some people on horseback. This just happened to be my slide I had in here. Whether you're sorting on the ground using paddles or as this boy's doing a feed sack, you can sort cattle in an alleyway or in a pen and make that work very well. So once again, I'm not going to say what you need. Everybody probably needs an alleyway somewhere to sort into, sorting pens. It could be coming out of your chute, or it could be coming out of a different location in there as well. So maybe even leading up to your chute could be a dual purpose sorting alley and means to move cattle into the processing area. I put this one in. Nobody needs to build this system, that's for sure. But it's got all the sorting capabilities. I don't know if you noticed here, but it's got two completely separate alleyways going to two chutes that go back into sorting pens on the front side. That's a pretty elaborate system, something 99% of us wouldn't use. But if we had a tremendous number of cattle that we had to process, this might be a very viable option for somebody trying to add capacity in a smaller area rather than build two systems. They just put in two systems in the same sweep and crowd alley situation. Same one I showed earlier, looking at how you can bring that flow into this 135 tub, back through your chute, back into sorting pens out the front of that. So a lot of different ways to look at building corrals. Have some way to load cattle out. Have either a loading dock kind of setup or loading chutes if you're loading trucks. Really good. The longer that slope can be leading up to a trailer or a truck, the better cattle are going to flow. A short, steep slope is never desirable, but build something that will adjust. This is an old system. It's old WW chute. I don't even think they make them anymore, but it adjusts down to where you can load from the ground. You can put it up on the first set of hooks all the way up to loading semi trailers out of this same chute. And the best thing I like about it, the front of it stays straight with its design, regardless of how you move it. A lot of loading chutes will either load a truck or you have to get it out of the way to load pickups there or have a separate loading facility. This one you can do either, and there's some of these on the market that allow you to do that, but they have to pivot from the base next to your crowd alley and not at the wheels like a lot of them do. If you're loading a lot of cattle out, chutes like this that have the gates up at the top that people can get in and out when they're loading trucks, makes a lot of sense. It flattens out before it gets to the truck. Cattle tend to flow better into a truck if that's the case. Loading chute dimensions, once again, in all of the materials you'll ever find, this is kind of what the recommendations are. The biggest thing I see, most people build them a little too wide. And so you'd like for them to stay single file as they go up that chute and don't turn around. This just talks about the height you need to get going into different types of trucks or transportation vehicles. And on the trailers, maybe all you need is to pile up some dirt to where it's somewhat close to the height of the trailer, but have it where you can back your trailer up over that dirt so that they have a very small step up to get into that trailer. Makes loading cattle so much easier than having them try to jump in the back of a trailer. Try to get what facilities you have to work better. Most of us have some. We may be frustrated with them, but maybe it's us and not the facilities that's a problem. So always consider what you can do to make it safer and easier to work. In our part of the world, we use a lot of portable corral systems as well. Don't process as much out of these as we do sort, but some of them are starting to process as well just because they don't want to build working facilities on lease country. But once again, these work a whole lot better on level ground than they do in hilly environments. This one works better in hilly environments because it's got cables that keep the pressure off the weight off those panels until you get them out. But it's not very good for anything but gathering and sorting and hauling with. So once again, there's all sorts of equipment out there that can fit your needs, or you can build something you need. The main thing we want to talk about is as we get to the end of this is old working chutes. If you've got this chute around your place, please get rid of it. This thing can choke cows and got too many handles flying around. And I still see some of them in operation today, but this is basically an old handmade chute with a guillotine headgate on it, and they've never been safe. This was the first portable chute in our part of the world, Silver King portable chutes, and it was a cow choker, but it was very sturdy, high tensile steel, very light, but it had a lot of problems. Then we come into those that portable chutes or stationary, had a lot of metal hanging off the sides of them you can bump your head on. Try to get as good a chute as you can for the money you have available. This is a hydraulic portable chute, but it doesn't have a palpation cage on it. So there's all sorts of different systems. And this kind of be the Cadillac of the deal. But once again, that adds expense. And so if you don't run a lot of cattle, maybe this isn't your forte. Some of these more utility chutes that are on the market that are safe, they're good. Look to those, invest in them so you don't hurt yourself or your cattle. And it may not even take that big a difference. This is a stouter made chute than those, but I have never found a squeeze chute that is ideal in my opinion. You can get some of them that are very inexpensive. If you don't have many cows, I understand that, but make sure that it will hold the animal safely and let you get done the veterinary practices you need. And from a BQA standpoint, think about whether you have neck access to give shots. Look at these shoots at trade shows or farm days, wherever you get a chance, to see if you can actually get in and give shots where you need to. Because a lot of these less expensive utility shoots do not have a place where you can get in and give shots. And this Pearson chute, you notice there's a little door right there behind the head gate. That opens up where you have full access to the neck behind the head gate. Even the preference chute has a little side bar that's bent so you can get in there and give those shots. But look at that so you don't hurt yourself by putting your arm in there and not being able to give shots where you need to from a BQA standpoint. All right, so that's going to be the end of it. I'll leave this. My contact information will be in here as well. I'll be glad to take pictures. These are some old references I used in putting this together if you want to look at those either.